Okay, so when we're assessing chick quality, often we can do that in the hatch baskets themselves, or we can do it after the chicks have been separated and put into the baskets here. Often this is done before we get in the basket. This would be considered typically like your good basket ready to go to the farm. We have some things that we're going to look at on the chick quality issues on that. Like I said, maybe done on the belt during movement to the vaccination part. But what we're going to look at as chicks is what I like to do when I go up to any basket of chicks is I like to look and see what their activity level. Listen to them. Are they too loud? Are they too quiet? Are they too active? You know, some things that you'll get if you get them stacked in a room, you can look at, are they gasping for air, looking out the holes? These chicks seem relatively comfortable. This is not the normal room we would do this in, but these chicks look relatively comfortable. So I kind of want to look at, okay, what's their activity level? The other thing is, you know, how alert are they? A lot of times if you give them a little bit of sound, you can see some chicks are going to respond. They're going to start going to a sound material. If they don't, you know, we got some issues. Why are they sitting too comfortably? Why are they not active? So we can kind of look at the chicks themselves and look at their eyes, the clarity of their eyes. Are they open, closed? Are they all sleeping? Picking up the chicks, a lot of times I'll pick up them, spend a lot of time in research and looking at numbers, and to me, I always like to do 2 at a time of everything, because one often will influence you. Oh my, I saw one like this, but you got a pair. I always pick them up as a pair. Pick up gently, you know, look at the chicks, flip them over. One of the things we'll always look for is the hocks back here in the joint. Are they red? Are they clear? Or do they have any red on the cere or the nose here? Those are indications of struggling to hatch. A number of different issues that could cause that, but really the red is there because they struggled to hatch. So then we can go back to our troubleshooting guide. We'll talk about that a little bit later of what that might indicate, how we can assess that, but we want to look at that. If we see that, if we're recording that, great. If we're not, we need to make some mental notes of how many we saw that. So again, looking at the chicks, looking at the quality, kind of getting a feel for them. You got to kind of get a feel after a while. Do they feel full? Do they feel thin? Looking at the vents, always an important thing to look at the vent. Is that navel healed properly? Maybe blowing on that vent there to look at the belly to look at that navel to expose it. How do they look? The other thing is, I like to look at their feet and their legs, look at their skin. Are they hydrated properly? If you get dehydrated chicks, you'll start see some little wrinkles or folds in their skin, and then that indicates, okay, you've got some chicks dehydrated. Now, if you pick up one out of a basket and there's one that's dehydrated and it's the only one, we're talking about biology. There's a range in everything. That's why we look at numbers. We're getting a visual assessment of chick quality. To really make some changes, we want to look at the numbers, the data that we generate from this. So we'll pick up several different chicks, kind of assess them, look at their quality, look at the eyes, you know, be careful holding them. The navel, is it healed properly? Their feet, their legs, again, activity level. Some of the things we may see in that as we pick up chicks is, okay, in a basket as they're going by, we might see something like this. This would be called an exposed brain. Again, we could have some of these in any group of birds, but if we see a lot of this, we can then look at the data afterwards and say, how many do we have? I hesitate to say, if you see an exposed brain, this is what caused it. We don't know that unless you see a higher incidence than normal. We have to look at the data. I get asked that often, where we pull up a chick like this, well, what caused that? Well, I don't know what caused that one to do that, but if we had 3% of the chicks had exposed brains, then we can start talking about it, what it may be. So, but we have to look at the overall numbers, but this would be like an exposed brain. So we would take that, obviously that's a cull chick. It's not one we want to send to the farm. Probably an extreme example of an unhealed navel is this chick, and I'm really showing this because I want to talk about what can happen with an unhealed navel. This is an extreme example of an unhealed navel, but even if it's mostly healed but not completely, that is a perfect avenue for bacteria to enter into that chick. The chicks hatch and they move around the hatch basket, moving all over where the other chicks are at. If that is not healed up, you can get some bacteria in there that either is from in the hatchery itself or just from the other chicks. And then they might not show any signs of infection or problem until they get out into the field, where they've the bacteria then had a chance to bloom and grow in that chick. So this is an extreme example of an unhealed navel. Obviously not one we would send to the farm. You know, would have a chick like this one, he failing to stand. He's got the red hawks. You can see here the redness on the back of the hawks there. Again, there's a number of things, a little bit of red on the beak, or the sear we call it. We look at that and say, okay, there was a struggle to hatch. If we have a whole basket of them and there's one or two that way, that can happen. If we have a lot of them, we have some issues. We go back to our troubleshooting guides, which we'll talk about in a different video, a different segment of this, where we talk about what each of these mean. But again, assessing it, looking at it, what do we want to look for and what do we want to record? Looking a little bit closer about some of the chick quality issues and the things we looked at. We talked about the button, and so we can see here on this chick, this is a very pronounced button. It's basically part of the, as the chick is pulling in the yolk material and closing up the navel, part of it is remaining outside of it. It dries, we call it a button. We also can see strings coming off, we call it stringy navel. This would be a button we definitely do not want to send these to the farm. We can see under this button, we can still see that navel is not quite closed. So we send these to the farm, we're going to have a high probability of getting some, one, the chick's probably not going to live, but two, some other bacterial contamination issues. So buttons, stringy navels, the incidence of those is going to tell us something. Obviously, we would like a hatch that has very few, if any, but if we get a high incidence, then we would then make some corrective actions, which we'll talk about the corrective actions in another segment of this, where we're taking the data and analyzing, because I really like to make sure we have numbers are large enough that we can make some assessment on. Again, with our dehydration, looking at our legs, our shanks, our skin, is it wrinkled? Do we have little folds? I know some people will take the chicks and put the feet up to the neck and feel the bottom of that temperature. Checking rectal thermometers or rectal temperatures as well. Couple of different methods we can do this. This is a typical like a Braun type thermometer, an ear thermometer used for humans. We use that to take temperatures in the ear or forehead or whatever. Different methods to do this. Some people will use an actual temperature probe that can be inserted in the rectum. If we use that, we need to be very careful to have a probe that has somewhat of a blunt end, flexible if possible, and be careful inserting that. The good thing about these thermometers is we don't have to completely insert it. So we'll get the thermometer up there, hit the little button here, get a rectal temperature, and what we're looking for on the rectal temperature is between 103 and 105 degrees. This can be done at various process points through the incubation or the chick pulling, either right out of the hatchery, which some people do, again, in the chick room as they're waiting to be delivered, and maybe in the intermediate process. That tells us a lot about the stress level. I talked earlier about getting the chicks, listening to them, looking at their activity level also. The rectal thermometer is really going to tell us a lot as well. And again, I like numbers, I like data. I don't like people to just say they look hot. I want to see numbers and data. So rectal thermometer is another way we can assess chick quality in the process and how they're being cared for. Chick quality assessment, there's been obviously other things we can do with chick quality assessment is we look at our moisture loss, which we'll talk about in detail later. What is our moisture loss? What is our residue of our chicks? And then really what ties in strongly with our assessing chick quality is something we don't necessarily do here. It's our 3 and 7 day livability at the farm. There's a very strong, not completely isolated to the hatchery, but a very strong indication of the chick quality coming out of the hatchery. We get good chicks out of our hatchery. We hatch good chicks, have very few culls. We send good quality chick. They will perform well at the farm. That's a really strong assessment as well. Again, that's just some data that we're going to get a feedback from our growers. So with that, I think that's our, mostly covered everything with assessing chick quality in the hatchery. Exposed brain, you may see different levels of this. We often are going to see it on back of the head or the side of the head. We're going to see where the skeleton didn't completely close. This has to make sure we're not distinguishing that from an injury. I have been in hatcheries where we've seen injuries through the chick process, the automated chick process, where you get some injuries on there. But this is definitely an exposed brain, something that would need to be recorded in our culling as we're culling chicks, of why some of the chicks have been culled. Again, just look. Just looking at the general nature of the chicks themselves, you know, what are we seeing? Looking at that navel, you can see here, navel, if we can't see it very well, we'll blow on it, trying to expose that. There's that button chick again. This looks like a very good chick here, very full, firm to feel. Navel is completely healed up, properly an active chick. One of the One of the things we can get chick weights to, there's some influence on chick weight that's would be due to moisture loss, but also egg size and breeder age. Talked about looking at